My name is Jim Connolly. I'm from the Center for Middletown Studies at Ball State, and I'm here this afternoon with Father Tom Blake of Grace Episcopal Church in Muncie. And thanks, Tom, for taking part in our Civic Role of Churches project.
Oh, well, thank you.
So I appreciate your time.
Privilege.
It is April 11th, 2017. So we're going to begin by talking a bit about your personal experiences, and then we're going to shift to talking a bit about the role of the church in the community in various ways. So begin, if you could tell us a little bit about your personal faith journey, how you became a priest, how you came to this position, how you see your role here at Grace.
Well, briefly, I was in a family that my dad's side of the family, they were Episcopalian, and my mother's a Presbyterian, so I grew up with one foot in both of those traditions. When I was in college, I had the experience of sort of taking classes in the Department of Religion and out of that kind of questioning my faith a little bit, but also seeking to understand it more. And so I went to Duke University. I was often at the Duke University chapel. I knew that liturgy and music were very important for me, and I became involved with the Episcopal Center at Duke and became the organist for that group as well. And I knew that it was very important. I knew that my spirituality was Anglican, that of the two traditions of my family, that the Episcopal Church really was where I needed to be. And I was confirmed there. I was confirmed as a college student. So, at least in my day, many people were confirmed in teenagers, as teenagers, and so it was a little later for me. But it was also a time of really nurturing my faith and asking tough questions and seeking God and knowing that it was really important for me to be a part of a faith community. And out of that, I sort of began asking questions about whether I might be called to the ordained ministry. And at first, I kind of tried to push that away, but it wouldn't go away. And so I followed up on it. And one thing led to another. I ended up at Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria, Virginia, in the ordination process through the Diocese of East Carolina. And I was ordained a deacon in the year 2000 and a priest in 2001. I served in Maryland for 3 years in 2 congregations, and then I was called here to Muncie, to Grace Church, where I've been for over 13 years.
Do you have any particular way of describing your main responsibilities in this role as pastor?
Well, it is, as a priest in the Episcopal Church, in whatever role I happen to be in, my responsibility is both sacramental and a minister of a proclamation of the gospel. So I preach, I teach, I administer the sacraments of Eucharist and baptism and anointing and so forth. So it's a liturgical responsibility. It's also a servant leadership role. I care alike. This is in the ordination vows for rich and poor and young and old and for everyone. I think also part of the role of an ordained minister is symbolic. I represent this community, this congregation in the larger community. I am present and sort of stand in for everyone else in places like hospital settings and hospital rooms when the entire congregation can't be there. Wouldn't be appropriate, but symbolically, I believe I stand in for everyone who isn't able to be part of it. I mean, so I am who I am because I was lifted up by the community, and so I'm a symbol of the community wherever I go.
Great, thanks. So let's talk about the community a little bit. Grace Church, you've been here now for 13 years. How would you characterize the condition of the church at this point? Do you see yourself as thriving, struggling?
I see I see us as being in this place of transition, like the church at large, and like other churches in this area and in North America. I don't use the word struggling. I think that we're holding our own. I think that we're transitioning, and I think we're transitioning as gracefully as we can. What does it mean to be the church in the 21st century? It means something very different from what it meant to be the church in the 20th century, and that was different from what it meant to be the church before. There's a tradition that continues throughout time. We proclaim the gospel. That message doesn't change, but I think that a lot of the norms of society have changed. The church is no longer in as prominent a place in society as it once was. We used to have to we used to consider our doors open for those who wanted to come, and we kind of expected people to meet us on our terms. And now the church is actually becoming more authentic, I think, to Jesus' example in the gospel, and that we are having to rethink that and know that it's actually more our vocation to be meeting people on their terms, where they are, not just in spaces like this, but outside and wherever people happen to be. So I think that it's actually a very exciting time to be the church. Things are changing very quickly. Things are changing generationally. We can't assume that people are going to be Episcopalian because their grandparents were or their parents were. We can't assume that people are going to necessarily come to church because that's what people do in society. But I think all of that forces us in a good way to be more authentic and true to the example of the early Christians and countercultural. I mean, I think the gospel really is countercultural, so it opens up new possibilities for us to be truer to what the gospel is all about.
What are some of the ways in which you think you're acting in a more authentic fashion?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have been able to accomplish here in the last few years is opening our doors every Sunday afternoon for anybody in the community who wants to come and have a meal. And this is a group of people who often doesn't show up on Sunday morning, but shows up on Sunday afternoon. And it's almost as if we have multiple congregations using this space now. The people who come on Sunday afternoons consider it their church, I think, just as much as the people who come on Sunday mornings. But it's a very different group of people. But just being willing to open our doors, being willing to welcome them on as they are, not necessarily trying to get them to conform to who we are, because that's not what we should be doing. I think sometimes we fall into that trap. We want you to come in and be just like everybody else here, but rather accepting people who bring different sets of gifts, and it enriches the whole community. So that's one of the ways that we engage the community. The other is that we are supportive of organizations like Christian ministries, that ecumenical organizations that do work in serving people in this community. We collect food for food banks. We support A Better Way, a ministry, a nonprofit organization that helps people who have been in domestic violence situations. And our Daughters of the King group does various ministries in the community as well. And so we try to assess what the needs are, and we try to figure out how we can offer our gifts that way. And it's not just about what we do on our own, but how we reach out to other denominations and other organizations. We have tried in recent years something called our Urban Day Camp, where that's very outset of that, we decided it wasn't just going to be about Grace Church. We were going to try to begin the organization of sort of inviting people, middle school students and so forth in the summertime to come in and have programs where we teach them how to garden and cook and plant trees and so forth, and also some insight on how to navigate technology in the world, and that was very well received. But it wasn't just us. We intentionally went out and engaged with other churches like First Baptist, but also some other organizations that were not associated with any religion. So that collaboration that we have is really important.
So you're anticipating many of my questions, so I want to dig into a few of these a little bit. One of those is your experience with other churches in these cooperative endeavors. Is this, in your sense, something new, is one of the questions I have. And also, how's it gone? Has this been a sort of a smooth process of joining up with these other communities?
Well, first, there are opportunities in Muncie for churches to come together ecumenically in worship, such as in Lent. There's a community Lenten series. There's a community Good Friday service. We have a long-standing relationship with the ELCA Lutheran churches, which we do a Lenten series with them. So I think that starting out in that sort of context of worship, that sort of enables us to build relationships where we can serve in other ways. But we have a bishop who is retiring right now after about 20 years of leading the Diocese of Indianapolis, and I'm struck by one of the things that she has said, that when she first began working in that role, irrespective, regardless of the churches and faith communities outside of the Episcopal Church, just among the Episcopal congregations, people were kind of territorial. Okay, this is what this congregation does, and this is what this congregation does, and they were competitive in some ways rather than actually having this need to work together. And over that time, I mean, maybe it's just because of the changing circumstances in society and that the church is experiencing, but over that time, she has noticed, and I have certainly seen as well, a willingness among these various congregations to work together and to collaborate in ways that they didn't in the past. And I think that's probably true in other denominations as well.
And do you think that's had a broadening effect in terms of how members of Grace Church regard members of other faith communities?
I absolutely do.
Can you give me any examples or any reason why you think that?
Well, and not only within the church at large, but also in an interfaith sort of way. We've done some participation in interfaith dialogue and conversation, and recently we had a man who was a refugee from Iraq come and talk about his own experience and having to leave with his family in a hurry under very difficult circumstances. And he is Muslim, and listening to his journey, I think, and his willingness to share that journey with people, and sharing his experience growing up in the backyard of a church in Iraq, a Christian church. I mean, so he has always kind of felt this interfaith cooperation, even there, but even here, he's sort of able to lead that and bridge that in helpful ways. So I think that in an interfaith sense, we seek to understand other religions more. I think in an ecumenical sense, we seek to understand other branches of the church more. We have a full communion relationship with the ELCA Lutherans. We have a full communion relationship with Moravian Church, although I don't think there are many Moravians around here.
Right.
We have, I think in our next General Convention, we're going to be having a conversation about a full communion relationship with the United Methodist Church. I think all of that is just great. I think it strengthens us. I think we have gifts to share among our various denominations. And I think we have gifts to share among our various faiths. And so the more that we can converse, I think we set a good example, especially in the current political context, dare I go there. But I mean, I think that being able to converse in healthy ways and learn about differences and how we bridge those differences, and I think that is all a good thing for the church to be doing in society.
Great, thanks. So I want to sort of expand on that, or in some ways maybe really contract on that, by looking at what's going on the ground here in Muncie. So this is a city that's changed economically in a very dramatic way over the last generation or so. Mm-hmm. It's lost industry, its fiscal and economic condition has declined. By a lot of measures, its social conditions have declined as well. And so in what ways do you see that context impacting all this activity, both the activities like working with Christian ministries and food banks and the Gathering Grace meal on Sunday afternoon, but also in terms of your interactions with other churches, other faith communities as well?
I think that it sort of puts us in a place of really needing to be more compassionate, needing to be truer to the vows that we proclaim in baptism, to respect the dignity of every human being, and that means really respecting where they are in their life circumstances. And I have people in this congregation who have shared with me how their experience in the workplace is very different now than it was a long time ago, or maybe not so long ago, but I mean, it's changed very quickly. Things that they once took for granted, things are not there anymore. Things that, the general sort of feeling within the workplace, morale down and so forth. And I really lament those things, but I'm glad that as a faith community we can be there for people to support them. And I think this is one of my jobs as a priest is to be able to simply to listen. There's a lot that I can't do. I can't solve these problems, but I can listen. I can have compassion, and I think that's really an important function of the church in these changing economic times, especially in this part of the country. But I think that the more that we reach out to other faith groups and find ways to work together on these things, and other groups within the church, the more that we can as a congregation put our minds together and figure out what we're going to do to try to make things better for people. So Gathering Grace is one expression of that, and the ways that we support Christian ministries and so forth. We also, for 6 years, had a relationship with an organization called a Teamwork for Quality Living.
Right, it used to be upstairs, I believe, right?
Right. We offered our space to them when they were in need of a space, and they recently merged with another organization, and the name Teamwork for Quality Living doesn't exist anymore, but the work that they do does. But that was a wonderful, engaging relationship that we had with them. I mean, it was beneficial not only for them because they needed a space, but for us because it made our space come alive. And they're gone now, but I think it sort of imprinted within us a desire to let that space be used in a similar way with another organization in the future. We don't know what that's going to be, but it really made our space come alive, and the programs that they offered were available to us. I participated in some poverty simulations and some workshops of understanding distinctions between classes and some other programs that they offered that really sort of helped to break through some of the barriers that we have and help to open up the lines of communication among people. And so that was a really good relationship that we had, and from which I think they and we grew.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned social class. Do you have any particular thoughts about the class divisions that are really quite evident in Muncie, and how that shapes the operation of a church like Grace?
Well, I think that's a very important question, especially for Episcopalians, because historically we have probably, we've broken down a lot of different divisions in terms of opening up things in the Episcopal Church and ministry opportunities for women and people of who are gay and lesbian and transgender and so forth. And I think the one that is most challenging for us, and it's part of our background, is breaking down the socioeconomic divisions that we that have sort of been built into maybe mainline Protestantism generally, and to Episcopalianism in particular. So I think that's something that we really need to continue to push ourselves in that direction, and also racial matters as well. Our general convention at the level, the church-wide level, the Episcopal Church has passed a lot of resolutions about looking into ways that we can look back on some of the ways that we haven't in the past that we could have done a much better job of bridging relationships and recognizing the divisions that exist racially and socioeconomically. But I think at least sort of beginning to ask those questions is really important. So I think that it's really important that we do that. But I think gathering grace, the meal that I spoke about, is one of the ways that we can that we have already begun to work at that. We have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But receiving the gifts that other people bring and receiving people as they are and not expecting them to conform to who we are, I mean, that's really our challenge, and that one of the most important things that needs to be happening within churches.
You mentioned being a mainline denomination. So in addition to the question of class, are there any other things about being a mainline church that create particular challenges for you at this point in time?
Well, so I know some people don't like the term mainline, and what
use
does
it in
that mean?
quotes.
And what does that mean anyway? But the mainline Protestantism, I mean the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian, the Methodists, and the UCC and others, have had a really tremendous effect on our nation and shaping our nation in the way that it has been shaped. We've tended to have a lot of influence politically and culturally, and I think one of the things that we're dealing with is that some of that is changing. That we sometimes think of ourselves as being more important. Just speaking as an Episcopalian, we've had more presidents or senators, Supreme Court justices who have been Episcopalians, and think about that sometimes, and maybe we still kind of see ourselves as being more important than other people see us. I mean, there are a lot of people don't know what Episcopalians are, and I think that sometimes we need to kind of step away and look at that. And a lot of the privileges that we had in the past are not there going forward, and so how do we fit within the culture at large?
So one of the things I wanted to circle around to that came up briefly, but I wanted to talk a bit more about it, is this question of membership. Certainly one of the larger trends in the religious scene in the U.S. now is mainline churches are declining in membership, while other kinds of churches are growing or maintaining their numbers. And so I guess two parts to the question. One is, what do the numbers look like here? And secondly, how is that a problem or a challenge for you at this point?
Well, it is a challenge, and if you go back, continuing that conversation about mainline denominations, if you look in the books, our roles here at Grace Church, it basically patterns the same. It has the same patterns as the larger church, and Go back to the late 60s, that was kind of the peak in membership, and over time that has sort of declined. But there are also some challenges with all that. You know, in the midst of all that, we changed the sort of ways that we the metrics that we use to count people. I mean, like now we use average Sunday attendance. We didn't before. Average Sunday attendance is not particularly accurate in the way that maybe it was even a couple of decades ago, because it used to be that people who considered themselves regular churchgoers maybe came 3 or 4 times a month, and now people who consider themselves regular churchgoers maybe 1 or 2 times a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make them any less of a member of the church, but it is reflected in a way that is challenging, you know, to sort of figure out how to bridge the gap between the different ways of calculating church attendance. Of course, it's, you know, you can look at the people in the pew, and one of the things that we notice is that the church is aging. There are generational issues. There are fewer people, you know, even despite the differences in the way that we calculate those. But I think that it's not just within the mainline church that, you know, I think there have been some Gallup polls and some other studies recently that show that even some of the evangelical churches are beginning to experience the same trends. The Roman Catholic Church kind of was held up for a while because of Hispanic
Right.
congregations, and I think even those are beginning to change now. So I think that while mainline churches and the Episcopal Church have experienced this longer, I think it's something that we're all in together now. And I don't know that there's any easy answer. You know, one of the things that I sort of resist is trying to be gimmicky. I mean, don't try to, you know, betray the basic foundations of our faith to try to make ourselves seem more appealing. I think that what will make us seem more appealing to people is that we remain authentic to who we are and the basic message, and also that we are open to the gifts that people bring, and not always expecting them to conform to us. But that sort of means that we have to be open to change, but change that is real and authentic, not change that is gimmicky, because I think people kind of see through that, and we shouldn't be doing that anyway.
So your thinking here is the transition you talked about earlier towards this new stance towards the wider community. That's the adjustment you make in response to some of these challenges, rather than, I don't know, extra hot coffee early in the morning or something like that.
Right. I mean, I know other congregations, other traditions, you know, have done some different things, and if it works, then for them, I don't want to be critical of that. But I mean, I think that we always have to be careful as we explore new ways of doing things, to make sure that we're doing them for the right reason, and that we're not betraying who we are. So to be authentic to who we are, I think is a very fundamental thing for people of faith.
Right.
And I think that we are more appealing when we are authentic to who we are.
Mm-hmm. So just one more question that's kind of specific to Grace, and that is that there's been a long tradition here of emphasizing music, both as part of the service and more generally. Do you see that as an element of the community's outreach or its engagement with
absolutely,
the wider area?
Because I think that ties in with what I've just been saying, is that within this congregation in particular, we have a lot of connections with the music departments at Ball State and other universities around here, and music and the particular type of liturgy that we do is something that is very uniquely Grace Church, I think, within this community. There aren't a lot of congregations that do the type of music that we do, which is largely centered in the Anglican choral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Episcopalians, we are Anglicans, and that's something that's really important to us. It's very integral to who we are. And just like some of our sister congregations in Indianapolis, specifically the Meridian Street congregations, the Episcopal Church, and All Saints Indianapolis, and our sister congregation in Bloomington, Trinity, and all those places and others, music and that Anglican choral tradition is very, very important. And I think people who come there appreciate that because they don't hear it in other places as well, but because we do it well. And so just identifying that, knowing that that's important to who we are, and those are part of the gifts of the community generally, is something that we need to keep doing. Now, if we were to have other people come in and they had different gifts, then I would hope that we found a way to incorporate those gifts into the worship experience and life of the community, and appreciated those as well. But a lot of the sort of musical, in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of popular for churches to say, well, we need to change our music in order to attract new people. But it wasn't something that sort of arose organically. It was something that people who didn't really have much interest in that music were trying to implement.
Just as a marketing tool?
As a marketing tool, right. And it didn't work, I think, in a lot of places. Maybe there was some sort of initial, maybe it's helpful, but I think if it's not organic, if it doesn't arise organically from the community, then it's probably not going to last. And I say that because I know that there are many other types of musical traditions and other ways of doing things that are very genuine and that arise organically and that work for a particular congregation. But I think that, again, being authentic to who we are and the gifts that we have is really what is important, and what people appreciate. So the type of music that we do here is probably not going to be something that appeals to everybody, but it is something that people know that is authentic and genuine, and the people who appreciate it, I think, are glad that we do it.
Great, thanks. I think we've covered most of the issues or the questions that I wanted to address, but I wanted to make sure I gave you the opportunity to add anything else that you thought was important. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very exciting time to be the church. I mean, as I mentioned, that we're in a time of great transition in the world, and in regions such as this that are changing economically. I think it's an exciting time to be the church in this culture where I think that we need to learn to listen to one another more, and to bridge gaps and divisions more, and to be in conversation more. And we say that conversation, holy conversation, is as much about listening to other people as it is talking. And I think that those are things that the world needs. I mean, we're such a divided nation. We're such divided in so many different ways. And I think if the church is at its best, we can model the sort of dialogue and conversation and example. I also think that when we go forth from here, having been nourished in word and sacrament, we don't really leave all of that behind. We take that with us into the world, and it informs all of the decisions that we make, and it informs how we participate in politics and our lives and our jobs and everything that we do, our interaction with others. So I don't like the idea of sort of saying that there are different realms, that one is the secular realm and the other is the sacred, and we kind of keep those separate, because I think that the Christian life is about taking what we do here and then having that feed us and help us in making the decisions and in the ways that we interact with people, no matter where we are in the world and in our lives.
Great. Thanks. Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Well, then,
Yeah.
thank you. It was much appreciated.
Wow, it's a great privilege and pleasure. Thanks.